Hey, what is up, guys? I'm Apache, open source self defense, fitness, and grappling. I am so sorry. I know I haven't put out any content on YouTube lately, so I'm just going to start dropping some audio tidbits, morsels, if you will, here on Facebook, and then I'll just go ahead and migrate them on over to YouTube when I get the chance. So, with that, there's a couple of things I've been wanting to talk about. First and foremost, let's talk about Chris Cyborg really quick. I'm just so utterly disgusted with the people who continue to push Cyborg by painting her as a victim. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not blaming Cyborg here. Okay? I'll get to that later. But right now, what I'm talking about is Chris Cyborg. The way that the MMA media portrays Chris Cyborg as though she is a victim of her circumstance. It's just not the case, people. It's just not the case. Okay? I mean, the simple fact is that Chris Cyborg is a 5'9" female that apparently, supposedly, cannot cut down to 135 pounds. Think about that for a minute. She is not a professional bodybuilder or physique competitor, yet she cannot cut down to 135. That's utterly ridiculous. That's ridiculous. There's no way. Because it's not like she has to cut to the 135 for, a month. It would be for one day, which means she has to get into striking distance to dehydrate out, which is probably between 145, 155, somewhere in there. And she can't make that cut. There are men in the UFC that are much bigger than Cyborg, bigger frames, taller men that have natural testosterone running through their body, holding on to their muscle, that can make a cut to 135, 145. But you're telling me Chris Cyborg can't. Here's the long and short story on Chris Cyborg when it comes down to it. We were sold a bill of goods that she was a super dominant female fighter, and she looked that way against mediocre or outmatched physical size-wise opponents. The last three females that Chris Cyborg has fought have all been legitimately 145-pound fighters. Two took her the distance, and both were one-dimensional, and the one that was well-rounded knocked her out. Now, I understand she's older, and she's not in her prime, but that being said, people, come on now. Come on now. She got taken the distance by a one-dimensional Holly Holm. Now, I'm a huge Holly Holm fan, so that's hard for me to say, but it's the truth. She is one-dimensional. The reason why she got beat up on the feet, and particularly in the clinch and in the exits of the clinch, was because she was selling out on tying up the arms. She was selling out at dominating the underhooks and overhooks so she could keep from getting taken down. She was petrified of getting taken to the ground. So she sold out on making sure she managed the distance between their hips, and so Chris used that to her advantage brilliantly, I might add. I'm not blaming her for this, to piece her up, but was unable to finish her. Next, you had her fight the number one best female fighter in the world, and she got knocked out. The Lioness knocked her out, mauled her. It wasn't even that competitive, if we're being completely honest. And now, She fights a new, young, up-and-coming, legitimate 145-pound girl who can pretty much just grapple. Really not great striking. She had a couple of slick, strikes she got in there. But she wasn't, nobody would say that was, a beautiful tactical striking match. So the problem here is, people, is that we got sold a bill of goods that Chris Cyborg was this super dominant fighter, a fighter the likes of which we would never seen. And the reality is we got sold a bill of goods. We got sold on something that she wasn't. She's a good fighter, but she's not a technically superior, outclassing people fighter. That's not who she is. She can outclass people who are beneath her, just like any professional fighter should be able to. Okay? But against women who are of her actual weight class, that are legitimate 145 pounders, she's just a good fighter. She's not a legendary fighter. She definitely is not the GOAT, but that's what we were sold for 10 years before we actually got to see Cyborg in the UFC. So Luke Thomas, Ariel Helwani, all the Chael Sonnen. I'm sorry, guys. Back away. When it comes to the UFC and Dana White, I know, I don't generally side with Dana White. But on this one, guys, this isn't, oh, poor old Cyborg. This is a business transaction, and she's just not worth keeping on the roster. Alright, guys, we're going to come back and talk about some other stuff later, but we'll catch y'all later. Remember, be practical, be purposeful, get fit with a purpose, and find your dangerous spaces.